Hey folks, this is Best in Slot and welcome to what is rather upsettingly the final episode for now of Prehistoric Planet Forests. A really good episode, my joint favourite with Ice Worlds. I'll give you my full ranking at the end. But yeah, just before we start, just huge shout out to everyone involved with the show. It's been absolutely incredible. It's absolutely everything we wanted it to be. I'm not without criticisms at all. Nothing is perfect, but it's pretty damn close. And it's been really cool and I've really enjoyed this week. Thank you to all of you at home who've joined in with the discussion and everything. And hopefully you enjoyed the videos as well. And hopefully you enjoyed Forests. And again, I know I've mentioned this before, but I couldn't get hold of a list. But shout out to everyone who's uncredited on the show as well. All those animators and special effects artists and 3D modelers and all these immensely talented people who did not get the credit they deserve. Let's get started. We're going to kick things off in South America, I believe, with Austro Poseidon, our sauropod, basically. It's a fairly chill little intro segment. I wouldn't say there's anything here too much I want to focus on. The Austro Poseidon's not a particularly interesting looking sauropod. I'm so sorry, Austro Poseidon. The patterning stuff is fairly tame. It's obviously blending in a little bit with the forest environment. It does have some interesting behaviour, in that it's knocking trees down in the way that we've seen with modern large, particularly African mammals. You know, it's just using that sheer heft and weight of its body to knock trees down to get access to those delicious supple leaves which are hiding away at the top. We all know where those supple leaves like to live. Anyways, so it's doing that kind of thing, and it's shot beautifully well as per usual. I love how there's a bit of a music shift here. The music in this episode, by the way, best so far. It is gorgeous and hilarious in varying quantities, but it opens up with this beautiful new piece showing the forests, and then the tone kind of just drops a little bit. It's the same piece, but the tone drops, it gets deeper to showcase our large bellowing titans, basically. Shout out to plants. Plants are super weird. That's all I've got for you. And then we're moving on to the Triceratops. My beloved has finally arrived, saving the best for last. Of course, was always my favourite dinosaur. Not just because it was Alan Grant's favourite dinosaur, although in retrospect that might be why. But I love Triceratops deeply, and this is a fantastic, my favourite rendition in media. By far, like I don't think it's even particularly close. I love the subtlety of that frill pattern, but it's still vibrant and colourful and exciting. There's a little bit of colour dimorphism going on here. But of course, we're not just here for the Triceratops, we're here with a little baby! I love it so much. I keep seeing comments from people saying it looks like a little gremlin, and it doesn't. It's adorable. If you want to see a gremlin Triceratops, go look at Saurian's Triceratops. That is a gremlin baby Triceratops. This one has a little bit of that. It's got like a very flat head. Obviously the frill hasn't like moved up yet into position. The teeny tiny horns look a bit weird, and how they kind of protrude so much of the face does give it a little bit of that sort of monstrous gremlin-esque quality, I suppose. And then the chubby cheeks and stuff. It's got a very weird shaped head, don't get me wrong, but it is adorable. I am in absolute love with it. It broke my heart. The animations of this little guy in particular are just so cute. It just feels so curious about the world. It's going to hop up here in just a moment. There's like a little insect over here, and it hops up and it kind of like scouts it out and checks it and makes these adorable little cries. Doesn't mention why quite yet, but they're venturing into this cave, and again the baby trike, we're focusing on this one baby trike, and it's clearly intensely curious. It's never been in the cave before, so it's hopping up and scouting around, and it feels sort of nimble and bouncy, and it kind of has a little clash with its parent here, and she feels just like, you just feel this big dichotomy between the two, where she's heavy and she's heavy. She's heavy, and every movement just feels a little laboured, and he's bouncy and sprightly. Anyway, so they venture deeper into the cave, and this is another camera trick utilised here, which I've been talking about the camera tricks quite a lot throughout this series, how they accentuate the size of the dinosaurs, how they ground the camera in the scene, how they make it feel more like an actual nature documentary. And I mean, I don't mean that in a way that dinosaur documentaries shouldn't be any less legitimate, but how they make it feel more like it's using an actual camera rather than CGI. And this is the best example of that in the entire show. It looks so good. We get this night vision camera shot of the Triceratopses working their way through the cave, and it's incredibly effective, it really is. And again, it really grounds the camera in reality. For the first two shots here, I kind of wish they stuck with it, but with the first two shots in this area as well, the camera doesn't move, which again kind of accentuates that feeling of it being a real trap camera located deep within the bowels of the cave, and it just happens to be recording these trikes as they walk past. It's immensely effective. Our curious little baby trike gets a little bit lost, gets left behind, is trapped in the darkness of the cave. There's no light here at all, so you need to use your parents essentially as a guide. And Attenborough builds it up, you know, one wrong move could spell the end. And again, it's heartbreaking. There's this sort of hesitant little cry, and it kind of walks forward and stops and looks around. You can feel the hesitance and the nervous permeating through the creature, and it is heartbreaking in a whole different way from what it was doing just a moment ago. But joy comes to the world, the trike makes it out, and we finally learn what they're doing here. So what it's saying is that, I should have mentioned with the plants before, it mentions that the plants have a defense, which is being poisonous, essentially. And what it's suggesting the Triceratops are doing is venturing through the cave to these clay salt deposits, these salty clay deposits, and they're eating the clay, basically lining their stomach with lining their stomachs with the clay to defend themselves against the toxins in the plants. So I did a little research into this because I was just curious. There is evidence of many animals eating clay, loads and loads of animals have been known to do it. Parrots in particular, I think it was. There was a 2017 paper by Brightsmith et al. So there were parrots, I can't remember the parrots were, I think they were in South America. Well, I guess we're in North America. There were parrots that were eating clay, and they were wondering, right, is it for nutrients or is it for toxin stopping? And that paper suggested that the toxin thing was probably incorrect for those parrots in particular. But there's tons of animals that do it, so this could definitely be viable either way. Moving on to Patagonia and the CARNOTAURUS. The CARNOTAURUS, who looks absolutely remarkable. First up, just the design of the CARNOTAURUS is fantastic. My favourite CARNOTAURUS. All these dinosaurs are my favourite dinosaurs in media, but the CARNOTAURUS in particular stands out. And what the CARNOTAURUS is doing here is clearing out an area in order to do a display, which we'll talk about in a second rather predictably. But that isn't talked about too much in the show, so again I want to look into this. I like seeing where these behaviours came from and if they're equatable to modern day animals. Now obviously quite a lot of animals, birds in particular, do mating dances and displays to attract a mate, but it's the clearing of the land. You know, this CARNOTAURUS is going around picking up weeds, picking up logs, dropping them out of the area to clear this area. And I'm sure there's others that do this, but there is one bird in particular called the golden collared manakin, which also lives in South America, that also does this. And the cleared areas, so it clears all these areas so we can do a mating dance, and the cleared areas, fun fact, are called leks, L-E-K-S. So fun fact for you there. Anyways, CARNOTAURUS looks remarkable, rumbly and growly, trying to attract its mate, sending out these low rolls. If I had one comment, I believe the newer evidence, and someone will correct me if I'm getting this wrong, that suggests that I think it's the osteoderms along the CARNOTAURUS's back would not be symmetrical, they'd be asymmetrical. But you know, it's paleontology, things change constantly, so. Anyways, a prospective mate appears for the CARNOTAURUS, and of course he does his dance, he's wibbling, he's diving, he's jumping all over the place, and he finishes off with the hands, which is, yeah, amazing. And he's sitting there at the end, you know, he's done his whole dance, and he's breathing hard, you can hear those heavy breaths, you can see the chest moving in and out, because he's just done this elaborate, intense dance, and now he's like, come on, love me, love me. Unfortunately, she's not impressed and she wanders off. I was very impressed. I was about to say I would mate with the CARNOTAURUS, but let's not go there. But it's very entertaining. The music really plays it up. It's a really funny scene, but kind of amazing to watch at the same time. And obviously the Uncovered was going to be about this, and it was mainly talking about, obviously, this, about the arms being used for display. And basically it just mentions that obviously this is something modern animals do all the time, that they have extra things that seem pointless but are just used for display, even if it hinders them in some ways, like peacocks, etc. And it mentions that the arms have a ball and socket joint at the end, and that they're also very strongly musculatured, which does suggest they are used for something. And obviously these aren't going to be used for hunting or gathering or anything like that, so display seems like the most likely. Obviously there's speculation here, of course there is, but it's viable speculation and it's entertaining speculation. Then we're off to East Asia with Corythoraptor eating nuts from the ginkgo tree. Remarkable coloration. I want to showcase the crest first of all because I love the detail on it, and it seems there's at least a few different crest shapes in there. I don't know whether that's just a genetic thing or they've been, you know, damaged over time and stuff like that, but some of them are a bit sharper and they're all different shapes, and there's a lovely bit of variation. But Corythoraptor is, by quite a metric, I would say, the most colourful animal in the entire show. It is covered to the nines in bright blue feathers. Maybe they just wanted to push the boat out a little bit with at least one of these feathered creatures. But Corythoraptor is not alone. There is I'm going to try to, I wrote down how Attenborough pronounced it, and it's Chengiosaurus approaches. Absolute beauty, she really is. The Pinocchio Rex. I love the coloration, I love the patterning, the skull shape. She looks beautiful, she really does. Yeah, she looks remarkable. There's a shot in particular, it's not really this one ventures that uncanny valley, but there's a side view shot as well where she ventures on just purely realistic and there, which is really hard to do with the bigger dinosaurs in particular, I would suggest. She goes on a little hunt, she's unsuccessful, as we saw in the teaser trailers and all that kind of jazz. And it's just one thing I wanted to point out, if you watch, for those who have watched it or are yet to watch it, if you watch in particular the Corythoraptor as it runs away, you can see by the body shape, they are very ostrich shaped, right? And it's animated wonderfully, and it's very clearly animated to look like an ostrich. You know, the way that the neck and the body seem sort of disconnected in a way. You know that you can pick up a chicken and do this, and the head can stay still, right? It feels kind of similar in that the body kind of just wobbles all over the place and the head's wobbling in different directions, and they don't feel necessarily connected, and it's very quick, but it looks incredibly gangly and uncoordinated, and it's very entertaining. But she's not to be defeated. She goes on another hunt. Doesn't she look beautiful? She goes on another hunt, and she's successful this time around. Not much to say about the behaviors here. It's just hunting, using the noise of the storm and the gloom that surrounds the storm to shroud herself a little bit better and hunt successfully this time around. Most hunts do fail at the end of the day, so you have to keep trying. There is a slight lack of blood in the show. I don't think it's a big deal by any stretch of the imagination. I know they're trying to keep the rating down, make this appropriate for absolutely everyone. But given that it is meant to be realistic, right? It's meant to be a realistic show, a naturalistic show. The lack of blood pulls away from that a little bit. I don't need it to be like a full-on gore fest, but you'd expect a little bit more than we're getting to an extent. And then we're off to North America. Fires are raging. There's a forest fire. The Edmontosaurus returns. This time Edmontosaurus is named, so that makes the last episode even more confusing to me. Last episode it was Hadrosaur, a Hadrosaur some description, and now it's named as Edmontosaurus as it is on the website. But this Edmontosaurus is guiding her children out of the forest fires, and that's what we get for now. And then we move on to this absolute stunner, the Atrocity Raptor. She's absolutely beautiful. She's got this very clear sort of eagle-esque feathering. I took several screenshots of her because I love her deeply. Coated from the front to the back in essentially the same coloration of feathers, which is really interesting and unique amongst the dromaeosaurs and amongst all the theropods we've seen in this series so far. Everyone else has some colour variation, but she resembles some modern eagles really well. She also lacks a counter shading in the slightest, which again is very rare for the creatures in the show and animals in general. Most animals are counter shaded, really. But she's doing a really interesting behaviour. So in yesterday's video, we saw the Troedontid using the fire stick to lure out prey. She's doing something similar, but she's got a smoking stick instead. She's got it's post-forest fire. The stick is still cindering with all this smoke, and she's using it to scare away or detract parasites from her body. Now, I did have a look into this. Smoke is well known for deterring parasites. That is definitely a known thing. I couldn't find evidence for... I'm sure it exists, I just couldn't find it. I didn't dive deep into the internet. I couldn't find evidence for animals directly using smoke, per se, to ward off parasites. Though it is interesting that there is evidence that city birds, pigeons, etc., well, pigeons really, will gather burnt out cigarette butts and put those in their nests, but it's not because of the smoke. The nicotine in the cigarettes will detract parasites. I just thought that was really interesting as a behavior. But smoke does deter parasites. Humans have been doing it for generations and generations, centuries, millennia. And I think it probably has been observed in animals, but the city bird nicotine experiments kind of dominated my Google results and I couldn't find anything else. But it's definitely viable, and it's something that an intelligent creature like the Atrocity Raptor might well partake in. Then we get an unnamed ankylosaur pops in. I believe based on what people are saying online, I didn't get this myself, but it's Anodontosaurus based on the very interesting, unique sort of club shape we've got going on here. And doesn't she look remarkable? Anodontosaurus pops up. She looks absolutely beautiful. I'm glad we got a little bit better ankylosaur representation here in this the closing couple of episodes. I love seeing ankylosaurs rendered with colour. It's such a rare thing in some ways. They're very often depicted in greys and browns and crimsons and blacks and stuff like that, but seeing these sort of sea green sort of colours on her is really, really interesting, really unique. And as you can see, she's chowing down on some charcoal. Loads of modern animals eat charcoal for its health benefits. I saw it in monkeys and deer and stuff like that. Observed it in just tons of different species. However, but someone pointed out as well that there was a paper by Brown et al. In 2020 that examined the stomach contents of a Borealopelta, another ankylosaur, and it had like 6 to 7% charcoal, so it was heavily suggesting that this behavior did exist in Ankylosaurids, which means of course it could also exist in Anodontosaurus, and maybe this is something that quite a few dinosaurs did, but this is a nice behavior because it exists in modern animals and we do have direct evidence for it in dinosaurs as well. The Edmontosaurus reappears, the babies are still alive. It's clearly the same dinosaur from yesterday, same patterning and everything like that. CGI was a little bit ropey here. The Edmontosaurus didn't quite blend into the environment. You can see here it looks a bit weird, but who cares? Please don't take any criticisms I have as a big deal. I am trying to... I don't know what these videos are, whether review or discussion or what. It's kind of a jumble of everything. So if something seems a little bit off, I do have to kind of mention it. We get some glowing fungi, and I don't know where we are at the moment. Over in Central Asia. And it's suggesting we don't really know why this happens, but maybe it's to attract insects to the fungi, which then helps spread their spores. And we see a giant sleeping sauropod. It's cool to see a sleeping... Well, we haven't really seen many sleeping dinosaurs in the series at all. It's cool to see the sauropod and how it might well sleep, how it would curl itself up in order to get that huge heft down to the ground. But it's not the star of the show here. The star are the little babies! My god. 2 adorable babies, 1 episode. These baby Therizinosaurus were absolutely the surprise of this episode. Had no idea these were coming. I did expect some Therizinosaurus, did not expect the adorable little babies. They are heartbreaking, as everything has been today. Now, there wasn't much to say about their behaviour per se. What they're doing is trying to climb up onto this log to get hold of a beehive so they can feast on the honey within. But they are beautifully animated. It's such a good job. They're trying to clamber up onto this rock and they keep tumbling off. And again, they're kind of rendered in that clumsy, funny sort of baby little way. But using their little wings, desperately trying to flap as well to get up there and kind of gripping on with those long claws onto the log to heave themselves up it. It was just beautifully well done, really funny to watch but also adorable, and you rooted for them and wanted them to do well. I love them deeply. Therizinosaurus has been rising in the ranks as one of my favourite dinosaurs for a long time, and the babies come very... I got like babies for 2 of my favourite dinosaurs in 1 episode. And you know, many modern animals do this same sort of thing where they see a beehive and they know instinctively that there's honey there, essentially. But of course we can't just have the babies, an adult appears. I know it's quite hard to see from this, but I just want to point out if you look on this upper left hand side, sort of around here, you can see the sort of variation in the feathering, this sort of banding. We've got these white bands here, and then we've got these red bands across there, all split by these sort of black markings, which is kind of similar to like snakes and stuff like that. I just thought the feathering was beautiful. We don't really see the adult in tons of detail, but you do get a sense of her size, of her just giant nature. She's got this little feathery mohawk going on and then this big covered floofy body. She looks absolutely beautiful. I'd have loved to see her in a little bit more light, a little bit more detail. Of course, we did see her back in the deserts episode, but you know, a full segment with a little bit more light and showcasing them would have been awesome. But the scene's framed really well in that the babies have been trying desperately to get this honey for ages, and she just walks up. The babies kind of scatter a little bit. She walks up, knocks it down, takes a big chunk out of it, and walks away with the bees trying to do what they can. But it's framed from the perspective of the baby Therizinosaur, so they're looking up at her, like seeing their own future, essentially. This is what they're going to look like when they're an adult, and they're kind of amazed by her size and her prowess, and there's this shot of them gazing up at her, and I mean, look at it. It is so cute. These giant eyes caught in the moonlight staring up at her. And you just feel the wonder and the admiration from them as they gaze up at her. Again, it's kind of like, at the end of the day, this is essentially what they always look like, but through the framing, through the animation, through the sound effects, and through all of it. They kind of just infuse the dinosaurs with so much personality. I'm putting all these emotions on the dinosaur essentially, but it's absolutely how it feels, and it's a beautiful scene. I think it might be cuter than the baby Triceratops, as much as that pains me to say. Anyways, for the final segment, we're heading off to Europe. We have here our Telmatosaurus, which is our little hadrosaur. Doesn't really do much, if I'm totally honest. Just kind of hangs around looking cool. It seems to be quite a small hadrosaur. Then we meet our Zalmoxes, which I am, again, in love with because of their hench little arms more than anything else. These little Zalmoxes henching around. These are only baby Zalmoxes. We never actually see the parent. I think that's the first time this happens in the show. I remember people seeing this for the first time and like, that's Zalmoxes? Doesn't look too much like... Because there's definitely some physiological differences, morphological differences between the babies and the adults, and I remember people being a little bit confused. But to me, based on the size of the log and everything, these were always quite clearly babies. Anyways, they're trying to make their way across the log. We don't spend much time with the Zalmoxes or in this segment, really. And one gets snatched up by this Hatzegopteryx. And as much as I think I tend to lean towards Quetzalcoatlus in terms of my favourite Atstarchid, this Hatzegopteryx is much nicer in terms of the design. The Quetzalcoatlus was a little bit boring. The Hatzegopteryx is a goddamn stunner. Maybe my favourite design in the entire show. No lie. Like, above all the dinosaurs, above all the adorable babies, this is an absolutely exquisite looking Hatzegopteryx. It just looks like paleo art come to life. I am in love. And it just snatches up one of the babies, and there's several screenshots of this thing because I just wanted to showcase it as much as possible because I just think it's beautiful. I don't know what else to say. It just looks beautiful. Look at her. She's paleo art. That crest design is remarkable. Love the patterning on the, going down the front there, the stripe patterning, and then this entirely different coloration and patterning sprouting up on the wings, the featherings covering her. And there's a whole thing, of course, about how she is an adept terrestrial hunter, which wasn't always given as the case, interestingly enough. So you see how the wings are like tightly folded in by her body, and that's allowing her to walk on those forelimbs, on those forefingers. Now, based on arm posture, body shape, limb proportions, and trackways showing their movement, this kind of movement, this tightly folded wings and everything, was actually posited by Darren Naish, Naish? I've butchered so many names in this series, who is the lead scientific advisor for the show, the guy you see on all the Uncovered, Tetsu, blah, 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 blah. Him and Witten proposed in 2008 that this was a thing. Basically, they're the ones who sort of started this all off, as far as I know, and it's really cool to see it 14 years later come to life in such a beautiful way. I'm sure that was a really nice moment for them, to see the theory that you put forward come to life and kind of beloved by everyone, I'm sure. There's a really nice tone change here as well. She just snapped up this adorable little Zalmoxis, kind of like as this giant threatening creature, but then she herself is presented majestically and beautifully with all this lovely music, and the music is phenomenal in this episode. We head down to the beach, we get these unnamed sauropods rubbing on each other, but it does mention that it's flying off to other islands. You see in the final shot, basically, really nice ending to the show. The Hatzegopteryx flies off to another island in search of food, etc, etc, so I don't think there's a guarantee necessarily of where we are, other than we're in Romania, basically. It's a very weird looking van. But, yeah, and that's the end of the show. The Hatzegopteryx flies off into the sunset and the show ends, and I'm very sad about it. It's been remarkable. This was one of my favourite episodes. The Therizinosaurus scene was incredible. The Triceratops scene was incredible. The Coryphoraptor scene was great. The CARNOTAURUS scene was incredible. The forest fire scene was pretty good. Not my favourite of the bunch, but had some really interesting behaviours. The only one that I wasn't big on really was the very, very first one with the Austro Poseidon knocking down the trees. I guess they wanted to show the knocking down the trees, but I didn't find the design of the Austro Poseidon very interesting, and I don't think the scene added much, but it was also quite short, so. Also, this final scene, it was really, the designs were beautiful, but what happened wasn't necessarily that interesting. But either way, really good episode. So my final ranking is, I'll write it down. So we've got F for Forest equals I for Ice World. So I put Forest and Ice World, these final two episodes, about the same. Owns, not by much though, it must be said, Deserts. And I can put Desert and Coasts together. It's close. I'd say Deserts is maybe a teeny tiny bit above Coasts, but it's very close. And then there's two of these, and then it's Freshwater, because Freshwater seems worse and worse with time. I really enjoyed Freshwater. It's still like a 7, 8 out of 10, but I think it's clearly quite a bit below the others for me. But yeah, today's was remarkable. Yesterday's was really good. I love the show. Everyone who worked on it, big shout out, big thank you to all of you, because you've done some fantastic work here. And I only wish it was longer and that we had more episodes, but I can imagine the amount of work that had to go into something creating like this is obviously absolutely crazy. Hopefully the show does really well. Hopefully loads of you have been watching it on Apple TV. And we get enough for a season 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 seasons and a movie, as we say. Thank you so much for joining me for this entire week. Let me know what you thought about, I should have mentioned that that's FR, because that doesn't make sense for us. Let me know what you thought about the Forests episode. What was your favourite episode of the entire week? Let me know your thoughts on the whole series. I'll see you lovely folks very, very soon. Cheers, much love, as always. Bye-bye.
Houston, if you're ready, we'll maneuver. Reaching out.